Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Um, I hope there's no major turmoil in anyone's lives. If there is, seek Yahweh, and I hope that you make it through it unscathed. But anyway, today I have been conversating with some folks, and for the life of me, I do not understand why it's so hard for people to understand this concept. All right, and I'm not trying to call anybody any ugly names. I'm not calling anyone stupid or ignorant or, well, I mean, I guess technically they are ignorant, which we're all ignorant about something. That's not a bad word, and it's not necessarily a bad thing in and of itself to be ignorant. I mean, it is if you remain that way willfully. That is actually stupid to remain willfully ignorant. But anyway, I've already talked about this in a couple of videos. One of them is named Parables and Stories or something like that. I'll link both of the other videos in the description under this one. But there's a definitive difference between parables and stories, okay? Stories are intended to convey a message, to teach a lesson, convey a message, or, just simply inform people about the events that the story is about. Parables, on the other hand, are intended to pass knowledge to those who are already supposed to have the knowledge that's being passed on. And Yeshua actually says this, when he speaks, 5 or 7 parables to the multitude, and, the multitude wondered, but they didn't understand what he was talking about, and then he went off and the disciples came after him and asked him, says, Master, why do you speak in parables? And his response was, because it's given to you to know, but to them it's not given to know. And in speaking in parables, this day the scripture from Isaiah is fulfilled, saying, hearing they will not, or seeing they will not see, and hearing they will not perceive, or something another like that. So the point of the parable is literally to tell people without actually telling them. Okay. And as far as stories is concerned, especially if we're talking about Yeshua, Jesus as he's referred to in America, but especially if we're talking about him, as far as parables and stories are concerned, anything that Yeshua says has to be absolutely unequivocally true, right? Whether it's a parable or a story, it has to be true. Actual, factual truth. So when he spoke the parables to the people, we'll use the one about the vineyard. It says there was a man, he planted a vineyard, and he set certain people over it. And when it came time to get the harvest, he sent servants to, sorry, one of my dogs is digging outside the barn. He sent servants to, collect the harvest. And the men that he set over the vineyard were wicked, and some of them whipped, or, some of his servants were whipped, and some of his servants were put to death. And so the man says, well, if I send my son, surely they will have to, be beholden to him, right? So the man sends his son, and the wicked men over the vineyard kill the son. All right? So we know that that's a parable, and there are a lot of people that don't understand it because it's not given to them to understand. But Yeshua, I think Yeshua explained that parable. He explained one or two of them. I'm not sure if that was one of them or not. But anyway, the vineyard, or let back up a second, the man in this parable is Yahweh. The vineyard is the earth, the people on the earth. You know, Israel and his servants and whatnot. The servants that he sent to collect the harvest, where some were killed and some were just whipped and sent away, that would be the prophets, right? Isaiah, Jonah, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Timothy, Paul, which Yeshua told this parable before Paul and Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and all the rest of them were put to death and or died or thrown in prison or, you know, exiled to the island of Patmos. And we know that the man's son, Yahweh's son, Yeshua, was put to death also, right? So that also tells us that the wicked men that were put over the vineyard were the Sanhedrin, right? The Pharisees. The Levitical priesthood that grew into the overstuffed government that they became. You know, and they're the ones that wrote the Talmud and came up with the oral tradition and all of that so many people go by today. But the parable is absolutely 100% factual truth. Period. And it becomes clear once you know who the people or who the entities, the beings in the parable are. You know, who it's talking about. Okay? So, understanding that, if you listen to actually the only story that I can think of at this moment that Yeshua told is about the rich man and Lazarus in Luke chapter 16. Okay? So, there was a rich man who did well in this life. You know, he had plenty to eat, plenty of money. He was well dressed and, you know, much liked and stuff like that. And then there was Lazarus, who was a beggar full of sores, you know, health problems and whatnot, that sat outside of the rich man's gate, and he desired to be fed from the crumbs of the rich man's table. So, and by crumbs, it doesn't mean literally crumbs. It means the leftovers, you know, the stuff that the rich man wasn't going to come back and finish. You know, Lazarus wanted to gnaw on his chicken bones and whatnot just to get the little nourishment that he could from them. And Scripture says, Scripture, Luke chapter 16 says that, and the rich man died and went to the place of torment, and Lazarus died, and the angels bore him up to Abraham's bosom. Okay? Well, that does not sound like soul sleep to me. And remember, we're talking about a story that Yeshua told now. Okay? And he told this story to convey a point. He absolutely did. He told this story to teach a lesson. That doesn't make the story untrue. The story literally cannot be untrue, because if it was, that would mean that Yeshua was telling something that wasn't true, and anything that you tell that's not true is what? It's a lie. So that would mean that Yeshua told a lie, and a lie is a sin. So if Yeshua sinned, then he cannot be the Messiah. It's that simple. It really, really is. There are no leaps of faith in there. There are no twisting of logic or anything else. It is literally 100% clearly straightforward. And, you know, I talk to people and I explain this stuff to them, and they try to tell me, oh, well, you don't understand. Lazarus was this certain tribe or this certain group of tribes. Well, no, that's not it. Because, and then they, and the rich man symbolizes this thing over here. And Abraham symbolizes this other thing over here. Well, that can't be true because, for one, Yeshua used specific names of specific individuals. Specifically, not to overuse that word specifically there, Abraham and Lazarus. And no, I don't believe it's the same Lazarus that he called forth from the grave, where he had the people remove the stone and, they said, well, he stinketh, And I don't believe it's that same Lazarus. It could be. I don't think it is, though. But in parables, specific names aren't used, because if he used specific names in the parables, then that would tell the meaning and whatnot of what's being said in the parable. It wouldn't be a parable anymore. It would be a story at that point when you use specific names. And by no means am I trying to step on any toes. I cannot fathom, in the most remote sense of reality, why it's so difficult for people to understand this. Part of it, I think, is because they are being led by their emotions more than their rational thought process, which is actually unscriptural. We're not supposed to do that. Excuse me for a minute or a second. I need to... wet my throat. That's better. So anyway, part of the reason, I think, is because they think with their emotions, and they don't want to believe that there is a place where people who aren't saved are going to be eternally tormented. And it refers to it in Scripture as the lake of fire. As a matter of fact, Scripture says specifically that death and hell will be cast into the lake of fire. Hell being Sheol. And yes, the word hell and Sheol does mean the grave, but it also means other things. You've got to stop thinking so linearly. You have to have a multi-dimensional concept, comprehension of Scripture, because Scripture is multi-dimensional. It's not... It is straightforward. It's clear what it says and everything else. But let's take another direction on this also. And moving away from the story of the rich man and Lazarus for a minute, talking about the lake of fire being eternal torment and souls being cast there, which I don't think they're going to be souls. I think they're going to have immortal bodies. I do, because Scripture specifically speaks of 2 resurrections, and it specifically says, pray or hope that you're part of the first resurrection, because the second death will have no power over those who are part of the first resurrection. Okay? What is the second death? Scripture specifically says the second death is being cast into the lake of fire. And Yeshua says several times in one chapter, in verses, right behind each other, where the fire is not quenched and their worm dieth not, to quote the King James Version. And I had somebody smart off to me one time, well, I've never heard of an immortal worm. So are you saying that Yahweh can't create or has not created a type of worm that will live eternally in the lake of fire to torment the people that are there? And another thing, I've had somebody telling me today that Yahweh told a lie in Genesis chapter 2, verse 17, I think. Let me look. Got it right here. And Lord, yeah, Genesis 2:17 says, "But of the tree of knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die." And so this fellow is trying to tell me that because Adam and Eve did not drop dead immediately when they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that's a lie. But it's not, because they did die. They lost their eternal status in this fleshy body that we currently live in. None of us lives forever. Yet. So yes, they did die in the day that they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They started dying that day anyway. But yes, they died in the sense that their immortality was lost. You know, aside from that, their multidimensional glorified existence was taken from them or lost to them. It wasn't taken from them, they actually threw it away, is how that works. So, I apologize if I'm stepping on anybody's toes. I truly, truly hope that if you disagree, you will ask some questions, because there are plenty of scriptures that explain what I'm talking about. Okay? Anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't finish talking about this fellow trying to convince me that Yahweh lied. Alright, so let me explain this also. Yahweh cannot lie. Alright? For one, his character will not allow him to lie. But to approach that from a different aspect, Yahweh's authority is so absolute, so unquestionably absolute, that when he says something, it becomes the truth. And as an example of that, you know, and I'm gonna kind of cliff notes it right here. In the beginning was, no, I'm sorry, wrong. That was John chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Light be," and light became. Period. Light became because his authority is so absolute that the things that do not exist obey him. They come into existence from his command. That is, yes, he does care, and he loves us, and you know, his character and his righteousness won't allow him to lie and be deceitful and underhanded and stuff like that. But you know, aside from that, you know, looking at things from a non-emotional perspective, that's authority. You know, my dogs know that I am the authority over them. You know, I don't try to lord it over them or anything like that, but when I call my dogs, they come. You know, when I tell my dogs to sit, they sit. They do that because they see me as the alpha. In other words, I'm the one with the authority. No, they don't love me. Dogs are not capable of love. They are loyal to the one who protects them and takes care of them, and to the pack that they're a part of. Because that's the way that they have been programmed in their instincts and whatnot. They do not experience love the way that what we're talking about. And yes, they will whimper and they do experience fear and stuff like that. Those are totally different emotions. And I apologize for that little sidebar. But my dogs obey me because they see me as the authority. They don't see me as the absolute authority because they don't always obey me absolutely every time, just like people don't see Yahweh as the absolute authority, because if they did, they would absolutely obey his every single word every single time, and there would never be any disobedience. He is the absolute authority, but he's given us free will to go against his authority. But that's a conversation for another time. So, people, please understand. And, there's something else I forgot, a different direction I was going to take about eternity, eternal torment. It's in Revelation. I don't remember book and chapter. I'll put it in the video, in the description under the video. But Satan is chained up for 1,000 years, right? And then at the end of the 1,000 years, he's loosed for a short time to go out and deceive the nations. All right. After he does this, what does Scripture say is going to happen? It says that he's going to be taken and thrown into the lake of fire where the beast and the false prophet are. Okay. So the beast and the false prophet have been there for 1,000 years already. Okay. Who is the false prophet? And by asking that, I don't mean specifically who. There are a lot of people that think it's the Pope. There are a lot of people that think it's, somebody else. But the fact is we don't currently know who the false prophet is. It has not been revealed to us yet. We got some pretty strong speculations, and they may be correct. But a strong, correct speculation is still not knowing. But, to get back on track, the false prophet is a man. Well, it might be a woman, but it's a human person. Okay? And this human person will have been in the lake of fire waiting for Lucifer for 1,000 years while Yeshua is reigning on the earth from Jerusalem, and Lucifer is chained up and can't get to the world and whatnot. So he's there for 1,000 years. Because I've had people tell me, oh, well, they're all just going to burn up and poof, it's just going to be ashes. Okay. Well, how long are they going to be there before they burn up? Because false prophet's been there for 1,000 years at that point. All right. So the next thing is, Scripture says that their smoke will go up forever and ever. When is the end of forever? Forever is existence without time. So anyway, this video has run way longer than I was intending to. I keep getting sidetracked and whatnot. My apologies. I sincerely hope that you've had the patience to watch through it this far, and that you will ask questions. And that you will, when you're discussing this with people, don't call them names. Don't get ugly with them, because that does absolutely nothing. And I'll tell you, when I'm discussing it with people and they start calling me names and telling me I'm stupid and, stuff like that, or I just don't understand Scripture, rather than having a decent conversation with me, I have the impulse to get retaliatory. And I'll tell you, sometimes I do retaliate. It's wrong of me to do, but I do it nonetheless. So just please be respectful of each other. Really, calling names accomplishes nothing. Telling people they're stupid and stuff like that. And, even today I told somebody that they didn't understand Scripture and they needed to get their head on straight. Or I told them something along that lines. I don't cuss at them or anything like that. I do occasionally let some of those words that are viewed as profane slip, but even when I use them, they're not profane. I use them in proper context properly. I don't drop the F-bomb and stuff like that. Anyway, again, that's another sidebar. So for those who have made it this far, thank you for watching. I hope that this finds you well. I hope if you have questions, you'll ask, comment, discuss in the comments area. By all means, I will monitor the comments. Anybody gets ugly, I'm deleting them. The comments, that is. And if they continue to get ugly, then I'll disable their ability to comment on my videos. But aside from that, remember Acts chapter 17, 10. Yeah, Acts chapter 17, verses 10 and 11. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15. And Proverbs 18, 13. I hope to see all of you in the kingdom of heaven. Yahweh bless.